Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So I just watched Heartstopper season 2. Let's talk about it. So yes, Heartstopper is back. One of my favorite TV series ever produced by Netflix.com has returned for a second season, and I am so excited. This is of course the series that was created by Alice Oseman and is an adaptation of her graphic novels, and she also writes each of the episodes on the show, so she's very involved, and it's therefore a very faithful adaptation of her work. And I really came to love the world that she created within Heartstopper after season 1 of the show, which became super popular, and I was so happy to see it because it was such a deserving series. So today I am super excited to be diving into this series, which is probably one of the most popular TV shows exploring queer love that we have right now. I can't wait to get into all of the good stuff, guys, but before we do, as per usual, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. Now without further ado, guys, let's get into Heartstopper season 2. So first of all, before we dive into the individual characters or couples, shall I say, I just want to give you guys my general thoughts on season 2, and I'm happy to report I'm happy to report that Alice Oseman and the cast and crew have managed to make lightning strike twice, because this was a brilliant second season to the show. I think this show is so endearing, it's so warm and optimistic, and even though it does dive into some really complex issues that these teenagers experience throughout the series, there's still this overall tone of optimism, which I think is very welcome, particularly amongst the LGBTQ community, which has had some problematic representation in the past. One thing I've always really loved about this series, among many other things which we'll discuss, is how realistic and grounded the world feels, despite the fact that obviously it has that tone of optimism. It does have this otherworldly feel that feels very timeless. It's very similar to Sex Education in that way, and I love that about some of the Netflix teen dramedies that we have seen in the past, especially the ones that are set in the UK. Not gonna lie, but the UK ones tend to feel a little bit more grounded and less Hollywoodized than the American ones, which I prefer. And here we have a similar thing with Heartstopper, and I think it helps, especially with the themes of queer love, because it makes it feel like, even though the series is quite optimistic and it's a fictional story, it's not quite as unattainable as if it was set in a world that feels very distant from the world that we live in today. And again, considering that this is a story about queer love that is predominantly directed towards teenagers, I think that sense of optimism being rooted in reality is extremely important, because it makes you feel like, oh, this could be something that I can achieve in my own life because their world isn't so different from my own. But alongside that realism, you also have enough of that artistic direction, like those little animations and the feel of the world overall, to make it stand out from the crowd in terms of other teen dramedies. Another great thing about this series is of course how it tackles some of these really important and complex issues that the characters go through. I feel like it does it in a very authentic way for the most part. I do have a couple of critiques which we'll talk about in a second, but it does feel very authentic. It feels very real. I mean, we have issues surrounding obviously sexual identity and sexuality from all different fronts. We're not just talking about a gay couple here, we're talking about lesbian couples, we're talking about asexuality as well to some extent. So I think that variety in the topics being explored within the banner of the LGBTQ community is so welcome and so brilliantly done through the use of all of these different kinds of characters. But then you also have, other problems like anxiety and depression, or the effects of bullying, eating eating disorders, self-harm. You know, there are really intense topics being explored through these characters, things that they're going through, but the way that the series does it is just so much more authentic in comparison to, say, in my opinion, something like Ginny and Georgia, where it just kind of throws all of these topics at you and just goes, this is a problem, like figure this out, you know, and then the kids are left to figure it out on their own. Whereas here, you know, you do have a little bit of that because it is a teen drama, but it's kind of sprinkled in throughout, so very cleverly and very intentionally. You get hints to some of these issues throughout the series, and so even when the characters are doing well and they're happy and it seems like everything is okay, there's that underlying sense of like, yes, but this is a multifaceted character and maybe there is an aspect of their life that isn't doing so well that they're kind of overlooking. And I really love that because this is real life, right? Like, even when you're at your happiest, there's always going to be one thing or two things that maybe aren't going quite as well for you, and whether or not it's a priority in that moment, you know, depends on your mood, on the time, but if you have someone who is looking out for you, they may be able to spot it and may be able to help you deal with it. And I think that's a really brilliant message across all of the different topics that they explore, and again, it helps it feel so much more realistic and grounded and attainable for people's lives. Now, having said that, I did mention that I did have a couple of critiques here and there, and my main critique would be that sometimes with the dialogue, with the way that some of these characters speak, it sounds like they're reading off of like a psychology essay, or like it sounds like they're speaking as therapists, you know, as professionals, as opposed to as regular teenagers. For instance, with characters like Charlie, who's dealing with an eating disorder and, you know, previous self-harm. You want to handle matters like this with extreme care and extreme caution because, you know, they're conscious of their target audience for this series, and, you know, some people may be watching and could relate to that experience directly. So they want to make sure their message is very clear and very careful, and sometimes the way that characters like Nick speak tends to sound like therapy speak. It tends to sound like a professional, you know, wrote notes on the right things to say in this circumstance, and doesn't necessarily always sound like a regular old teenager would say those things. But other than that, I think the way that it handles these really complex, important topics is truly admirable, especially because it is under the banner of this, you know, teen drama series that is overall very optimistic in tone. Now, another great aspect when it comes to the Heartstopper series is its cast. Oh my goodness, the cast is brilliant, guys. I want them to be my friends. No, throughout the entire show, everyone keeps looking at the main friend group and being like, man, that's such a good friend group. Like, you have people like Imogen just like side-eyeing everyone and being like, damn, like, why can't I have friends like that? And honestly, Imogen is me. I am Imogen, okay? Because I am so jealous of this crew. They're an amazing friend group. They seem so cool. They understand each other. They care about each other. Like, this is something that many of us wish we had during, you know, high school or secondary school or sixth form or whatever. And so seeing them as a friend group, I mean, first of all, it makes me very jealous. Okay, it makes me very envious, but also it's just wonderful to see. They have such brilliant on-screen chemistry together, and what I love even more is the fact that they actually feel like regular teenagers. Okay, long gone are the days where Hollywood would get these like 30, 40-year-old actors to run around in schools, slamming lockers, going to homeroom or gym or whatever, and we're supposed to believe that they're like 15, 16-year-olds. Like, like, sir, so we can tell that you have 3 kids, okay, a wife, a mortgage. Like, we can tell. We can tell that you are a fully grown man. You are not running to AP Physics. Like, These guys actually look the part, you know, they actually look like real regular teenagers. Again, I'm so happy that we've moved away from that old type of casting for these teen shows, because I think it makes for an even more relatable experience for these teen audiences if the characters actually look and feel like them. And of course, it doesn't escape me, it never escapes me, mind you, that we have a very diverse cast here. So there are a lot of diverse characters, both, you know, racially, ethnically, in terms of gender, in terms of, you know, some people having disabilities or, you know, neurodivergence. Like, all of these different types of characters are represented in this series, which is great to see as well, because it means that more and more people in the audience will feel like one of the characters is directly relatable to them. And finally, before we dive into the individual characters and couples, another thing that I really loved about season 2 is the fact that we finally kind of stepped out of the school a little bit. The first half of the season is all about the characters, particularly Nick and his year group, because he's in year 11. They're preparing for their exams, they're preparing for their GCSEs, which is so triggering. That was so triggering to me when I kept seeing that exam paper in front of him with that H. For those of you who don't know, you may be in America or elsewhere in the world, but that H on the exam papers means higher. It means he's doing a higher exam, so he must be in one of the top sets. You can have a foundation exam, but your grade will only be capped to a certain, well, now they have numbers instead of letters, so I think it would be like a 6 for a C or something along those lines. But he was doing a higher paper, which means he's going for those A stars. He's going for the A's and A pluses and A stars, like the 8s and 9s. So yeah, I just found it so funny. Okay, listen, I'm an old grandma now, at the ripe old age of 26, but it was actually exactly 10 years ago now that I was sitting in Nick's position and seeing that exam paper in front of him was very triggering for me. Okay, but it brought me all the way back. But yeah, so in the first half of the season, you have this focus on academics, which I always love, because these kids are going to school, let's not forget. So I like the fact that they do emphasize, you know, the stress and anxiety surrounding exam preparation and thinking about your future, as is the case with Elle. You know, what is the next step? You know, what do they actually want to accomplish with their lives? That's a really important question that these teenagers face in this season. But then we get to move away from the schools, and we get a bit more insight into their home lives as well, which is welcomed. But we also get the trip to Paris, which was just wonderful. Again, I also went on a Paris trip with my school. I was actually in 6th form, but it was also about 10 years ago, or I think 9 years ago now. But I could relate to this completely, although we went through the Eurostar instead of on a coach. Anyway, listen, the point is, this was very relatable content for me. Okay, I was smiling from ear to ear. I just loved that part of the series. And again, I love the fact that we stepped out of the classroom, went on this nice little trip, and saw these teenagers go through these like big life experiences, both legal and not, and it was just, it brought a new dynamic to the show that was really welcome. And that's what you can do when you have a second season. You kind of broaden out the world and let the characters experience more vibrant things. Okay, so now let's dive into the couples. Now let's dive into the characters, starting us off with, of course, Nick and Charlie. Okay, Nick and Charlie, to say that they're goals, it doesn't even begin to explain. Like, to say that Nick and Charlie are it doesn't even give it justice. Okay, like, we need another word, we need another phrase. Nick and Charlie are perfect soulmates, absolutely, like absolutely soulmates. Now, I was actually worried. I was worried because it's the second season, and you know what that means? It means we need to have problems. It means in order for there to be a plot, in order for there to be dramatic tension, we need to have problems within the relationship. And so I was like, oh no, at some point in this season they're gonna break up and it's gonna be awful. awful. It was giving me Young Royals vibes, where I was like, oh no, I just want Willem and Simon to be happy together, but for the sake of the plot, something needs to happen, so like, I guess we're gonna have to see a breakup. And I think Young Royals pulled it off pretty well, although it was very upsetting the whole time. But I can't wait for season 3. But I think in this case, they went down a different route, where they're still together, but they're facing this greater tension of coming out to their community, especially in the case of Nick, because Charlie was already outed and suffered horrible homophobia and bullying for it. And so now with that precedent, you have Nick with this like added pressure and anxiety, focused on trying to come out himself, especially because he doesn't want Charlie to think that, you know, they have to remain a secret forever. That's exactly what Charlie was trying to avoid with Ben, and so Nick feels extra guilty for putting him through that again. And so throughout the season, you see Nick attempting to and often failing to come out to his friends and family, and you constantly have Charlie, you know, reassuring him, telling him he doesn't have to do so, but he feels that pressure, as I said, because of, you know, Charlie's past with Ben and everything, and also just for himself. He wants to be able to, you know, experience these wonderful things with Charlie as his boyfriend openly, as opposed to keeping things hush hush. Although I would say they weren't really that hush hush, like as someone who's been on these school trips before many times, I would have been able to clock. I think everyone would have been able to clock that something was going on. At one point, they literally go up the Eiffel Tower holding hands, and I'm like, oh, so we're not keeping this on the DL after all. But anyway, the point is that he wanted to be open about his relationship with Charlie, and so he did feel that pressure. And so you have him, you know, coming out to Imogen, first of all, which is a huge hurdle for him. And then you also have him coming out to his father, to his brother, who in that case he's actually outed because he has pictures of Charlie, and his brother proves to be a really, you know, horrible bullying type of character. And Nick is able to deal with this moment tremendously, especially with the support of Charlie and his close friends and his mother, portrayed by the great Olivia Colman. It's just so great to see him kind of, you know, increase in confidence as the episodes go on. And when he gets to the point of coming out to his father, he just has so much more confidence and self-assurance about him, especially, you know, when he's talking to his father, he mentions the fact that his father doesn't know anything about him, you know, just setting aside his sexuality. His father's literally not interested in any aspect of his life, seemingly. And that just hammers home this message of, you know, there's this pressure to come out, you know, of the closet. If you're part of the LGBTQ community, you have to let everyone know. You wouldn't want to mislead anyone. You have to clarify rumors. You have to do this. You have to do that. But in reality, you don't really owe anyone any of this information. And it wouldn't be such an issue or such a big deal if it wasn't for the fact that in this heteronormative society, being heterosexual is considered the default. And so you have to declare when you are not in that default category. But in actuality, it's not fair to place so much pressure and anxiety on these young LGBTQ people to have to come out of the closet and define themselves in these certain terms when they're also trying to figure things out for themselves. You know, this is society's problem, it's not their problem. And I think, you know, the whole journey with Nick trying to come out to his friends, family, and, you know, school really demonstrated that brilliantly. So yeah, it was a really complicated matter, because on the one hand, he wanted to come out, he wanted to be open about his relationship with Charlie. He didn't want to feel like another Ben 2.0 and, you know, betraying Charlie by keeping him a secret and everything. But on the other hand, he didn't really owe these people these explanations to begin with, and it sucks that he was put in that position because of the heteronormative society that we live in. I like the fact that, you know, first of all, that this was explored, and also through this storyline we got to learn a lot about Nick as a character, and we really dove into his home life, his complex relationship with his brother, and his absentee father who hates his family for some reason. Like, I don't understand this man at all. That Frenchman, he baffled me, okay? As fun as it was to hear Nick speak French, or that the accent was, Kit was trying. As a French speaker, I was like, the accent isn't quite accenting all the time, but it makes sense because he's predominantly in the UK, so I'll allow it. I do think it's crazy. You know, his father's literally just inexplicably insane to me, coming in like literally twice a year to be like, hey family, and having the audacity to comment on anything that's going on in that household. Meanwhile, Olivia Colman is a single mother essentially. The audacity that this man had, I said, get him out of here, okay? He is not welcome. So yeah, that moment when Nick stands up to his father is like truly iconic. I was clapping for him, but it really gave us a lot more insight into his character, and it was, you know, really sad, really bittersweet, but it was nice to see that he does have people supporting him, like his mother, like his friends, and of course like Charlie. And also shout out to Kit Connor for delivering a great performance this second season. The character goes through a lot of different, you know, emotions and struggles, and he's able to act the hell out of each and every one of them. He's such a brilliant actor on this show, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing him in more things. And he has incredible chemistry with Joe Locke as well, so like just a match made in heaven, truly. And speaking of Joe Locke, next up we have Charlie, of course, and similarly to Nick, Charlie also has a lot of academic struggles at the beginning of the season, this time around mostly stemming from his distraction. Okay, he is distracted by the fact that he has a new boyfriend, and so he's all wrapped up in that love story and kind of neglecting his studies. And so you have this thing where his parents are trying to, you know, get him to focus on his academics once again, and that unfortunately means, you know, pulling back on the constant texting, constant making out with Nick. And Charlie's like, oh, like this is a this is a horrible price to pay for a history essay. So he's getting to work on that history essay. We never found out what he got on that essay though, mind you. I'm guessing it's like an A, like I'm guessing he did well. But then we also dive in deeper to his character and see the after effects of the bullying that he experienced largely in season 1, and we see that, you know, even though technically everything is all cleared up, he has his friends, his family, they know about his relationship with Nick, everything should be fine, but subconsciously and deep down you still have the after effects, the side effects of that horrible traumatic experience that he went through with the bullying. And so he's developed this eating disorder where he barely eats anything, and he feels like subconsciously that's one of the few things that he can control in his life, so that's kind of what he started to do. But then it's also revealed at the very end in this like heartbreaking scene that had me on the floor, rocking back and forth, crying in a corner, sucking my thumb. He reveals that he was self-harming, and it's something that's just kind of thrown in there, and it's like, oh, we don't need to elaborate, we don't need to explain, we don't need to describe. It's just like okay, already we know where we're at. And I think Nick's reaction was just like perfect. You know, he didn't try to dig deeper, say how did he do that, like what happened, why would you do that? He was just really supportive and amazing. But yeah, that was a very emotional scene at the end of the series. That was just a really emotional scene at the end of the series, and it just kind of tied in all of these issues that Nick had noticed in Charlie as they, you know, got closer. And so I think, like I said, it was a very authentic way of depicting these things, because even though everything seemed to be fine and dandy with them together, there was still these like underlying issues that Charlie was facing and perhaps not even fully cognitive of, and it took someone who, you know, paid close attention to him to point these things out and hopefully help him move past them. And I think in the larger scheme of things, it speaks to how, you know, this bullying, this harassment, this homophobia, this anti-LGBTQ sentiment that some people may experience has, you know, larger implications in their lives. It can be very damaging and very traumatic, and that, you know, trauma can manifest in different ways, which is why highlighting these issues is so crucial, and also why dealing with them properly on the show is such a high stakes concern. But other than the usual trials and tribulations of being a young LGBTQ couple, Nick and Charlie also have these really wonderful, light-hearted and again optimistic optimistic moments in their love story. And I think that's also just as valuable to see. It's so important to see these, you know, happy LGBTQ couples kind of living their lives, having a good time, and it's not always doom and gloom, even though these issues do come up. Okay, so next up we have Tara and Darcy. Now, Tara and Darcy was such an interesting couple in the first season because they were kind of like a blueprint. They were kind of like a template for a gay couple, essentially, you know, as lesbians. And it seems like, you know, Charlie was looking up to them and thinking like, oh, like maybe I could have that, you know, with another guy, because they just seemed like they had it together. They were just like this old lesbian couple, even though they weren't actually older, but because they'd already gotten together, they'd had that whole love story already. They just seemed really established and smooth sailing. Well, season 2 season 2 throws some hurdles in their way, again for dramatic tension, and you have this issue where Tara at the beginning of the season tells Darcy that she loves her, and Darcy literally just freezes and is like, cool, back at you. Like, she's like, oh, it was just a casual I love you, even though they both know it wasn't. And Darcy's reaction to, you know, Tara saying I love you spurs on a lot of these like questions and perhaps insecurities about their relationship, because she too had felt like they were in a very comfortable place, but now all of a sudden with that reaction she feels really insecure about their position. And not to mention, Tara does notice that Darcy tends to, you know, swerve away from serious issues and having important conversations, as she tends to make things into a joke. And so Tara's kind of contemplating this and noticing more and more of it, and she starts asking questions about like, why have I never gone to your house, and why have I never met your parents, like what's going on? But it turns out that the persona that Darcy puts on for their friends and even Tara to some extent is kind of fictional, you know, because in reality she is facing similar insecurities and issues at home as some of these other characters. It turns out that she has a very different home situation where her parents don't really see her for who she is at all, and so she has a very tense relationship with her mother, which we see, and that leads her to even sleeping outside in the park because she can't bear to be at home anymore, because her mother makes such a huge deal about her trying to wear a suit for prom. It was really wonderful once again to see how supportive her friend group was, and of course how loving and supportive Tara was, and in the end where they have that like I love you scene, it's just really wonderful and really emotional. And I also think that it speaks to this feeling of found family that is relatable to a lot of people in the LGBTQ community whose biological families may like reject them and you know, discriminate against them. The idea of finding your found family, you know, people who share your experiences and appreciate you and welcome you in, is a really welcome one. And so again, it's just really brilliant representation on that front. Next up we have Tao and Elle. Now I have to admit, after season 1, Tao wasn't my favourite character. Okay, the way that he was treating Nick had me side-eyeing him majorly, and it was mostly because even though he was definitely trying to look out for his friend, you know, for Charlie, there was always this element of like selfishness where he just wanted everyone to, you know, stay the same, and you know, the friend group to never change, and it just felt a little bit overbearing and a little bit, you know, frustrating with the character. But with this season we again peel back a couple more layers of the character of Tao. We have this really great scene where he's talking to Nick and he's explaining how, you know, because his father died when he was 12 years old, perhaps that put this fear of losing the people he's closest to within him. Perhaps that's where it started, and so that helps kind of explain, perhaps not justify, but explain his behavior throughout season 1, and I think that went a long way to make him a more empathetic character. And it was also really profound because it showed us two very different different relationships with father figures. You know, you have Tao, who obviously loved his father, they were very close, and the loss of his father was a huge loss for their family, both him and his mother. But then you have Nick, whose dad is a jerk. Like, his dad sucks. His dad is literally the worst. And so again, very different dynamics in terms of, you know, sons and fathers here. But this season, Tao is in a tizzy because he's realized that he has this massive crush on Elle, and so he's trying to get together with her. But one huge hurdle that they're facing in their relationship is, one, you know, how to transition from these besties, from these best friends, to a romantic couple. But then when they figure that out, there's, you know, problem number two, which is the fact that Elle is, you know, going to be going to this art college that is quite far away, and so how are they going to maintain that relationship with that distance? You know, are they prepared to go long distance? And considering the fact that Tao has that fear of losing people that are closest to him, how is he going to handle the fact that Elle won't be, you know, right across the road anymore? So yeah, this was all good stuff. You know, this was all very cute. I was kind of frustrated at the beginning when they were like, does he like me? Does he not like me? Oh, I can't tell. Like, oh, like, yeah. Like, he does like you. Like, you both like each other. It's very obvious. Let's move on. But then they did move on, and you know, I found the tension of Elle moving to a new college to be, you know, quite interesting. I think that was enough of a plot there to be engaging. And you did also have that added element of the art college being very prestigious, but also having this exhibit or exhibition highlighting LGBTQ talent in the college, and Elle manages to meet another trans student, and they bond over their experiences, and so it really is a new exciting chapter for Elle in her story, and I'm glad that Tao was able to support her in it, you know, especially after that initial freak out moment that he had. And then next up, on a very short note, okay, we have Ben and Imogen. First of all, my poor girl Imogen, babes, you deserve so much better. I don't know what's going on, but you need to pick up that self-esteem, sis, because you deserve so much better than Ben. Ben, no. Okay, they were dating for a little bit there, and I think it was mostly because Imogen feels like an outsider. You know, she sees that amazing friend group that Charlie and Nick have, and she kind of wishes that she had something of her own too. You know, obviously she had a crush on Nick last season and that didn't work out. I think she's trying to find someone that, you know, looks at her as a priority, as their number one, the way that Nick does Charlie and Charlie does Nick. Like, she just really wants that connection with someone. Maybe I'm speaking from experience, but let's put that to the side for a second. But I think that's essentially what her character is yearning for. And I think seeing all of these different versions of love, or these different like configurations of love, is kind of opening up her perspective a little bit, and maybe helping her kind of understand her own sexuality a little bit more. Who knows? Let's see if they explore it in season 3. Because, you know, it turns out, oh yeah, I forgot to announce this at the beginning of the video. It turns out, you know, public service announcement, everyone at this school is gay. Every single person at this school is gay as hell. Like, everyone is gay. Everyone is gay. You know, you're gay, I'm gay, everyone is gay at the school. Okay? So Imogen probably is too. I wouldn't be surprised. I do think in terms of her character journey, she's just someone who really wants that connection to be someone's number one. And Ben was never the one to give it to her. Ben was never the one to give it to her. Oh, please, nothing but disappointment with that kid. But listen. I will say, okay? I will say, even though Ben, awful, sucky character, for sure. But I did kind of feel bad for him. I did feel bad for him, because every time he was trying to talk to Charlie, first of all, Nick was like a brick wall. You could not get through. You cannot get through Nick, because he was like, you're not talking to my man. Absolutely not. Okay, he told Ben to F off so many times, and it was like, damn, Ben ain't going through at all. Okay, but then the one time he did manage to peek through to Charlie, Charlie told him where to go. Charlie told him where to put his apology, and it was iconic and it was deserved. But at the same time, a small part of me, because I'm just so full of compassion, you see, a small part of me was like, oh, I feel kind of bad for Ben. He was like, I've been through a lot, I was going through some things, and that's no excuse. That is no excuse for the way that he treated Charlie. But also, like, what were those things? I felt kind of bad for the guy, not gonna lie. So I hope in season 3 we figure things out. Like, I hope we are able to reconcile with Ben. I kind of hope that he has a happily ever after. Maybe that's just me being a saint, like, who knows. But I think he deserves to be heard out by someone, not by Charlie. Charlie is moving on to better things, but maybe by a therapist, for instance. Like, let's just see where Ben ends up. And finally, if I could just dedicate 5 minutes for the adults in the room. Next we have Nathan and Yusuf. Listen, okay, first of all, I told you everyone's gay. Everyone's gay in this school. It must be something in the water. Secondly, I love the inclusion of their storyline, because I feel like for a lot of people, and not just people within the LGBTQ community, although of course them specifically, but even like people like myself, okay, I feel like watching this series as an adult is like, it's bittersweet, because you're like, oh, these guys are so cool. This friendship group is amazing. They're so loving and supportive and wonderful and open with each other, and they communicate well, and it's all perfect. Man, I wish I had when I was 16, like, you know what I mean? I wish I had that. And so it's very bittersweet watching this series. And I feel like the teachers, of course, you have the return of Nathan, the art teacher from season 1, who helped Charlie out when he was being bullied and eating lunch in his classroom. And then you have the new addition of Mr Farouk. Mr Farouk, the icon that you are, okay? But these two characters kind of act as these like avatars for perhaps older members of the LGBTQ community, who are kind of watching this with this bittersweet emotion as well, thinking like, oh, if only my experiences as, you know, a young member of this community was as similar as that of Nick's or Charlie's or anyone in that amazing friendship groups, you know, and if only I had that support system that they do on the show. So you see Yusuf / Mr Farouk talking about how he only came out when he was in his 20s, and I think that speaks to that experience that, you know, older people in the community have, where they weren't able to have that teenage dream experience. That's also not perfect, but certainly better than, you know, their own experience. So this series is a little bittersweet for them. It's again very optimistic for the future. It tells us that progress is happening, although that's constantly being challenged every single day on all fronts. At the same time, it's nice to have these characters that echo that bittersweet feeling, that also have their own cute little romance on the show as well. But guys, listen, I had the time of my life watching Heartstopper season 2. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I love this series. I love the characters. I love the world. I love that this exists. You know, Netflix doesn't get enough credit, although pay your writers and pay your actors, Netflix, but Netflix doesn't get enough credit for its LGBTQ content, because quiet as it's kept, none of the other girlies are doing it like Netflix is. Let's be real, when it comes to LGBTQ teen dramas, Netflix is queen, and so I have to give it props where it's due, although again, pay your writers and actors properly, Netflix, and release your numbers. But with all of that being said, I'm going to be giving Heartstopper season 2 an 8 out of 10. So that's it from me, guys. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Heartstopper season 2, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this series down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.